Over 11 days in May 2024, I travelled overland by ferry and train from Kiel in Germany to the four continental Scandinavian capitals of Oslo, Copenhagen, Stockholm and Helsinki. From the fjords of Norway, the bridges that link Denmark together, the rolling green landscapes of southern Sweden and the islands and lakes of Finland, I took the slow route round the ScandiCaps. In this episode, I complete my journey, witnessing an overnight tax-efficient stop in the Åland Islands, sail through the Swedish fortifications of Sibelius that failed to stop Helsinki falling to the Russian Empire, and explore the Finnish capital. Having left the islands of the Stockholm archipelago, our ship is on a 22 nautical mile diversion for tax reasons to Mariehamn in the Åland Islands. When the EU abolished the ability to sell tobacco and alcohol duty-free on intra-EU transport in 1999, it created a problem for the companies that run what had up until then been profitable booze cruises between the capitals of the two countries with the highest rates of excise duty on alcohol. Mariehamn offered a solution to this, as the Åland Islands, of which it's the capital, are a semi-autonomous part of Finland, a full member of the EU in all aspects except VAT and excise duty, and therefore, for the purpose of travel, count as a third area, which means, for tax purposes, any ship calling at the islands is leaving the EU and then re-entering, meaning that pesky ban on duty-free sales doesn't apply. And so, every night, between about 10 p.m. and 5 a.m, a small flotilla of cruise ferries sail up the channels into Mariehamn, stop to drop off and pick up passengers, and then head back out again, doing the entire process in under 20 minutes. On most nights, between Silja Line, Tallink and Viking Line, at least a dozen ships, each with a capacity of around 3,000 berths, stop in a city with a population of just 12,000 people. As the Silja Symphony sailed up the fjord into Mariehamn, we passed the Viking Cinderella, which we'd been sailing behind all the way from Stockholm. It had left Stockholm about 30 minutes ahead of us, giving it time to get into Mariehamn, dock, unload and load, and then depart and get into the clear channels of the fjord for us to be able to sail past and make our own approach. Despite it being a quarter to midnight, Mariehamn is only 720 kilometres south of the Arctic Circle, so in late May, the twilight never quite gives way to the night itself, with a red glow of a just set sun creating a beautiful shadow outline of the city as we approach the harbour. Before executing a graceful 180-degree turn and then slowly backing into the dock to enable vehicles to drive off and on. from Mariehamn, the journey continues south, back down the fjord, and then along the southern edge of the Åland archipelago, before skirting the southern coast of Finland all the way to its capital. I'd gone to bed shortly after departing Mariehamn and woke the following morning just as we entered the islands to the southwest of Helsinki. After a while, the unmistakable outline of Helsinki came into view on the horizon, with the green dome and white paint of the cathedral, and then the spires of the other churches of the city easily identifiable. And then comes the most impressive entry into a city of any we'd experienced on this trip, as this not insignificantly sized cruise ferry slowly glided past the fortifications of the islands of Suomenlinna. After passing for fortifications, it was then just a short sail into the very heart of Helsinki, where we moored up at Silja Line's Olympia terminal. The terminal was built in time for the city's hosting of the 1952 Summer Olympics, and today serving exclusively for Silja Line services to and from Stockholm. And with our arrival, it brought to an end to our cruise ferry crossings of this journey, though not to being out on the water. Luggage safely stowed away at the hotel, it's back out onto the water for a short crossing back over to the islands of Suomenlinna. Today, the islands are home to about 800 residents and are a popular destination for both tourists and locals alike, with ferries running backwards and forwards up to every 15 minutes from early in the morning until well after midnight. The crossing also allows for close-up views of the Silja Symphony that we'd arrived into Helsinki on earlier. The sea fortress has been known by several different names. When it was built by the Swedes during the period Finland was under their control, it was called Sveaborg, and in Finnish, Viapori. Following Finland's successful independence from Russia in 1918, it was renamed to Suomenlinna, literally translating as Finland's castle. The fortress spans over 6 of the 8 islands in this group, which cover 2.21 square kilometres. Though with land infills and bridges, it looks less than 8 when viewed on a map. Nyen was the Swedish fortress and city at the outlet of the river Neva, and with it the Swedish controlled the Baltic and their empire, but included land that today would be Finland and Russia. In 1703, Tsar Peter the Great defeated the Swedes, and on the site of Nyen founded a new imperial city, St. Petersburg. With the Russians now starting to take control of the eastern Baltic, the Swedes looked to fortify their possessions, and the need to build a strong fortress in the Gulf of Finland was a priority. Construction work on the first fortification started in 1748, and by the time it was completed had become the most expensive defensive project in Swedish history. Major parts of the construction had been completed by 1757, when building works had to be paused as Sweden was obligated to support its French ally in the wars against Prussia, but started up again in 1762 and continued until 1791. The battle that Sveaborg had been built for never came, though. The Russians didn't sail into the Gulf of Finland to try and seize the territory. In 1808 they came across the ice, with Helsinki falling to the Tsar's forces on March the 2nd, leaving Sveaborg out at sea looking back to a homeland that was no longer controlled by Sweden. With an unusually late thaw, the sea ice was still in place in early May, making any attempt for the Swedes to reach and rescue the garrison in Sveaborg impossible. On May the 3rd, the garrison surrendered to the Russians, and from that point forward the Russian domination of Finland was all but guaranteed, with the land becoming the Grand Duchy of Finland within the Russian Empire. The fortress became home to a Russian garrison, who continued to develop the site, adding barracks, a hospital and a church. As Russia spiralled into turmoil following its 2 revolutions in 1917, the Finns took the chance to seize their independence, declaring that the union of Finland and Russia had been a personal union under the Tsar, and with him and his descendants dethroned, albeit at that time they were just held in protective custody, a grislier fate awaited them a little over a year later after the Second October Revolution. That union was over. On the 15th of November 1917, the Bolsheviks declared a general right to self-determination for the peoples of Russia. Finland wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth, and on the same day the Finnish Parliament issued a declaration taking control of power in Finland. Worried about the ongoing problems in Russia, the Senate in Helsinki proposed that the Parliament declared full independence on the 6th of December. 12 days later, the Soviet government issued a decree recognising Finland's independence, something Germany and the other Scandinavian countries quickly followed, ensuring there was no going back. However, shortly after independence, Finland slipped into a short but bitter civil war, which lasted from January to May 1918. Following the war, Suomenlinna became a prison camp for the defeated Red Guard, mostly comprised of urban Finnish speakers and landless rural cottagers. The camp became infamous, as of the 8,000 prisoners on the island, over 1,500 succumbed to either starvation or epidemics. In 1919, the last prisoners of war departed the islands, and the first Finnish flag was raised over the fortress. The fortress remained under the control of the Finnish Ministry of Defence up until 1973, with only those issued with a permit allowed to land on the island right up until 1948. With the Finnish defence forces occupying the site, some of the Russian buildings on the island were demolished, including parts of the church which had its onion domes and other Orthodox features removed and instead rebuilt into a Lutheran church. At the same time, the tower was adapted to become a lighthouse. In 1973, the islands were passed from the Ministry of Defence to the Ministry of Education, though the Finnish Naval Academy is still, in part, located on the islands. In 1991, Suomenlinna was added to the UNESCO list of World Heritage, with further awards coming at the end of the decade for the expert and high-quality restoration works carried out on the site. Today, almost all of the island is open to the public to explore, including many of the fortifications and tunnels built through the islands. There are kilometres of paths and trails through the islands, with perhaps the most interesting being the one that takes you from the harbour, facing Helsinki, all the way across the fortress to the King's Gate. The gate was the original main entrance to the fortress, and today it's the first major sight you pass as you enter Helsinki from the sea, as the ferries pass right by it. Between 1986 and the Finnish adoption of the euro, the King's Gate was on the largest denomination 1,000 mark banknote, which mapped to just over 168 euros. The following morning, it was back out to sea on a cruise around some of the islands that make up Greater Helsinki, including, assuming the sea conditions are right, a sail through the narrow Laajasalon Channel. There was a little bit of doubt about this when we'd booked the tour the previous afternoon, as the Baltic sea levels, which had thwarted a trip through the Kanalen in Stockholm, was still a bit of an issue. But in the end, it turned out there was enough water to get through. Just. After setting off from the fish market in the centre of Helsinki, we first started by sailing out to Suomenlinna and skating past the northern coast of the islands. As we sailed past, we were able to get some of the best views of the island's church, originally built as an Orthodox church, but after Finnish independence converted to Lutheran and adapted so the top of the dome also acts as a lighthouse. From Suomenlinna, we headed across to the channel and low bridge between Satahamina and Laajasalon Islands. Today, the 4.28 kilometres square Satahamina is a closed island, still under the control of the Finnish military, with several institutions, including the National Defence Academy, based on the island, providing an out-of-the-way location for the training of some of the country's soldiers, with Finland still having general conscription for all adult males. Opposite is the significantly larger Laajasalon Island at 8.39 kilometres square, the 83rd largest island in Finland, which will spend a significant part of the journey travelling around. Due to the size of the island, it's home to a number of different sub-districts of the greater Helsinki area, most of which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, names scrolling past now. Having sailed past Helsinki, home, like many of Finland's islands, to a number of summer villages and cottages, we sailed round into a bay and channel formed by Laajasaari and Tammisalo Islands, home to some very expensive looking properties. This is the point where, if the waters were too low, we could have hit a dead end, but thankfully the water levels in the Laajasalon Canal were high enough for our boat to be able to pass through.
To get to town. Russia had taken over and was building Helsinki into an...
As we passed through, it was obvious that the water level wasn't the only thing that was only just right to let us through. The width of the channel and the height of the footbridge over the channel making for a very tight fit, and certainly earning the captain their pay for the day.
And so, the Canal was built after much haggling.
Back in Helsinki, we headed over to the open-top bus tour of the city to take in more of the sights. Though the initial departure was delayed for a couple of minutes, whilst we led a combined march that was starting from the Senate Square past, there appeared to be multiple causes, including peace, rights and environmental causes represented, with each group being set off at short intervals. The bus tour starts at Senate Square, the historic central square of Helsinki. The square is home to a number of key buildings, including the State Council Castle, which is home to offices of some of the most important ministers in the Finnish government, as well as the Ministry of Finance, the main building of the University of Helsinki, and most prominent building, the Helsinki Cathedral. One of the symbols of the city, the green-domed Helsingin Tuumiakirkko, was built between 1830 and 1852, in part in reaction to the capital of the Grand Duchy of Finland being moved from Turku on the west coast in 1812, a decision taken by the newly victorious Russian Empire, as Turku was considered too close to the freshly defeated Sweden that Russia had taken Finland from. Originally built as just a Lutheran church, St Nicholas Church, the church was renamed to Sukoko in 1917, following Finnish independence, as the previous name was perceived to be too Russian. With the founding of the Diocese of Helsinki in 1959, it was raised to the status of cathedral. At the centre of Senate Square is a statue to Alexander II, Tsar from 1855 to 1881, who, compared to the later Tsars, is considered to have been a noble ruler. During the period of repression started by Nicholas II in 1899, where the empire tried to Russify Finland, the statue established itself as a venue for anti-Russian demonstrations. Today, the square is one of the tourist focal points of the city, with the cathedral steps a popular place to sit for tourists and local alike on a sunny day. Founded in 1550 by King Gustav I as Helsingfors, the city was intended to serve the purpose of consolidating trade in the southern part of Finland, acting as a competitor to Rival, modern-day Tallinn in Estonia, a nearby Hanseatic League city which dominated the local trade. However, just 11 years later, that initial purpose was lost when Sweden won northeastern Estonia, including Rival, in the Livonian War, and Helsingfors slipped into importance. In 1710, plague swept through Helsingfors and killed the majority of inhabitants. However, by now, things were hotting up in the Baltic, with the Russian seizure of Nairn from Sweden and the founding of St. Petersburg. The Swedish response was to create the fortifications of Sveaborg to protect Helsingfors and the rest of the Finnish realm. Rather than engaging the sea fortress in a naval battle, the Russians simply took advantage of a very icy winter in 1808 and walked into Helsingfors, across the sea ice, and the following year took control of the whole of the Finnish lands from Sweden. Very conveniently for the newly arrived Russians, a major fire destroyed about a quarter of Helsingfors in November 1808, giving them a blank slate to start with on redevelopment of the town. With the formation of the Grand Duchy of Finland, the Tsar wanted to protect his new realm and decided that the predominantly Finnish Helsinki, close to St. Petersburg, would make for a much better capital than the existing, very Swedish-leaning city of Åbo, or Turku in Finnish, right out on the far west of the duchy. With Helsinki now the capital, the Tsar ordered the rebuilding of the city in neoclassical style, with the aim to have it rebuilt along the same lines as St. Petersburg. Over the years, many of the key establishments of the country were set up or relocated to Helsinki, including the Royal Academy of Turku, which eventually became the University of Helsinki. The reinvention of the city as the duchy's capital was finalised with completion of what's today Helsinki Cathedral. According to the August 1939 Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between the Soviets and the Nazis, Finland was placed under the Soviet Union's sphere of influence, and on the 30th of November 1939 the Soviets attacked, bombing Helsinki and starting the Winter War. Through the Winter War and the continuation war that followed, the Finns fought the Soviets to a standstill, but not without the city being bombed on multiple occasions. As Finland was fighting the Soviets, it was considered to be a co-belligerent with Nazi Germany, and after the end of the war the country was forced to pay reparations to the Soviet Union. Despite the war reparations, the city and the country in general thrived. Just 8 years after the end of the continuation war, the city hosted the 1952 Summer Olympics. Ultimately, the Russification of Finland failed as the Finns developed a strong national identity, and one person to whom a significant amount of credit for that goes to is Johann Julius Christian Sibelius. Widely regarded as the country's greatest composer, Sibelius was born in 1865, and the core of his work are his set of 7 symphonies, of which the Karelia Suite contains perhaps the most well-known piece of his music. In the aptly named Sibelius Park in the Tula district of Helsinki is a monument to the composer who died in 1957. 600 hollow steel pipes welded together in a wave-like pattern. The final morning in Scandinavia, and once again it's back onto the water, this time to explore closer into the centre of the city, with a tour hugging close to the coastline as we sail west round the headland dominated by the park at Kivupuisto and head round into the Åland district of the city, home to some of the city's most impressive Art Nouveau buildings. No water tour in Helsinki is complete without heading either past or, in our case, through the channels of Suomenlinna, once again sailing past the historic King's Gate, the original entrance to the fortress. Heading back towards the city centre, the cruise heads into the North Port area of the city, located on the opposite side of a small headland from the Viking terminal and the main fish market area of the harbour. From here there are excellent views of the Orthodox Cathedral. This area is also home to the crucial icebreaker fleet that helps to keep Finland's shipping lanes open during the harsh winter months when the sea freezes, assisted by the Viking and Silja Line cruise ferries, who have specially strengthened hulls to help break their own sea lanes. The following is correct for 2024, though you'll want to check with relevant timetables as services may vary during the year based on seasons or events. I started this journey in Hamburg from where there are regular RE7 and RE70 services north to Kiel, taking about 75 minutes to make the journey. Colour Line departs Kiel for Oslo each afternoon at 2 o'clock, arriving in Oslo at 10 the following morning. DFDS departs Oslo each afternoon at 3 o'clock, arriving in Copenhagen at 10 the following morning. SJ operate about half a dozen direct X2000 high-speed train services between Copenhagen and Stockholm, taking around 5 hours and 20 minutes to make the journey. Further options available with a change in Malmö, taking the journey time up to around the 6-hour mark, as well as overnight services from Malmö, taking around 10 hours. Silja Line departs Stockholm each afternoon at 4:45, arriving into Helsinki at 10:30 the following morning. From Helsinki, I caught a Finnair flight back to Hamburg, and then the return portion of my BA flight from London.